Do you know the one polite answer that can let a cop search your car tonight without a warrant? It's usually one word, yes. And once you say it, you may hand away your rights before you even realize the stop changed. Hit subscribe right now because what I'm about to show you could save you from a search you never meant to allow. Like this video now so you can find it fast when your heart is racing on the side of the road. Here's what you're about to learn. The exact sentence that shuts down a consent search. The one question that tells you if the stop is really over. The line you use if an officer tells you to step out. And the court cases that back all of this up in plain English. I'm not talking about movie stuff. I'm talking about real roadside moments where your mouth can either protect you or bury you. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos and the same mistake shows up again and again. Drivers think they're being polite. Drivers think they're making the stop easier. Drivers think talking more will help. Then 10 seconds later, their trunk is open, their bags are out, and their whole night is destroyed. Let me show you exactly how that happens. And more important, how you stop it before it starts. Now think about how traffic stops really feel. Your hands get sweaty. Your brain speeds up. You want the officer to like you. You want the stop over fast. So when the officer says, "You don't mind if I take a quick look, right?" Most people answer without thinking. They say, "Sure," or "I've got nothing to hide," or "Go ahead." Most people have no idea that this is the moment the stop can change from a ticket into a fishing trip. Here's the reality. Police do not always need a warrant if you give consent. And they do not have to make that request sound serious. They can make it sound casual, friendly, even helpful. That's why this mistake is so dangerous. It doesn't feel like a legal decision. It feels like small talk. But your answer can decide whether your car stays closed or gets torn apart. The first move is the biggest one. Never give consent to a search. If you remember only one line from this video, remember this one. Here's exactly what you say. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Word for word. Memorize that line. Say it calm. Say it clear. Say it once if needed and again if they keep pushing. Do not explain. Do not debate. Do not add nervous jokes. Just say the line. Why does this work? Because consent is the shortcut. If you give it, the officer may not need to fight for anything else. You handed them the shortcut yourself. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because it makes the record clear. If the officer searches anyway, your refusal matters later. If you say yes, that protection gets much weaker fast. Bad way. Most drivers say, "Yeah, sure, I don't care." Then the officer opens bags, checks containers, and finds something the driver forgot was even there. Good way. Smart drivers say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Then the officer has to rely on some other legal reason, not your permission. This is 100% legal. You're not being rude. You're not resisting. You're not picking a fight. You are using your rights with one calm sentence. And here's the case behind it. In Schneckloth v. Bustamante, the Supreme Court said a consent search can be valid even if the person did not know they could refuse. In normal English, that means this. The officer does not have to warn you that you can say no. That's why you must say no yourself, out loud, on purpose. Watch what happens when people miss this. The officer says, "Mind if I check the car real quick?" The driver laughs and says, "Go ahead, man." Now the officer is inside the car. Maybe they find cash, maybe a pill bottle, maybe a knife, maybe something that belongs to a passenger. Now the whole stop explodes. And the driver keeps saying, "I said he could look, but I didn't mean all that." That does not help much later. Here's the reality. Your goal is not to stop every search with magic words. Your goal is to never be the one who opens the door for it. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection because it removes the easiest path officers use every single day. So if an officer asks, "You mind if I search?" you already know your answer. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Calm voice, hands visible, no extra talking. Have you ever been asked that exact question during a stop? Drop a comment below with yes or no. Because once you notice this trick, you'll hear it everywhere. Now let's handle the next moment that traps drivers. The paperwork is done, the warning is written, your license comes back, but the officer keeps you talking. This is where you need the second line. You look at the officer and say this: "Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" Those exact words, clean and simple. Here's the trick they don't want you knowing. A traffic stop is supposed to be about the reason you got stopped. Maybe speeding, maybe a busted light, maybe rolling a stop sign. It is not supposed to turn into an endless roadside interview just because the officer feels curious. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings. In Rodriguez v. United States, the court said police cannot stretch out a stop longer than needed just to do extra investigation, like bringing in a dog sniff unless they have another real reason. In plain English, once the job of the stop is done, they should not keep you there just to fish. That's why your question matters so much. Am I being detained or am I free to leave? It forces a choice. Either the stop is still legally active for a real reason, or you should be allowed to go. Bad way. Most drivers say, I guess I can stay and answer a few more questions. Then the stop drags on, more officers arrive, and the pressure grows. Good way. Smart drivers say, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Then the officer has to make the stop clear instead of keeping you stuck in confusion. And let me show you exactly how this plays out. The officer hands back your license and says, hey, before you go, where are you headed? You got anything illegal in the car? Mind if I check something real quick? A lot of drivers think they still have to stand there and cooperate because the badge is talking. Not always. Ask the question. If the officer says you're free to leave, leave calmly. Do not hang around. Do not keep chatting. Do not ask if they're sure. If the officer says you're being detained, then you know the stop is still active and you stop volunteering information. Watch what happens when you do this right. The officer realizes you know the difference between a legal stop and a casual pressure game. That changes the whole tone. Former police officers have confirmed this works because it removes the gray area many officers rely on. You're making them say what is actually happening. And no, this does not mean floor it and drive off. If the officer says, wait, you wait. If they say you are free to go, then you go. The point is clarity. Confusion is where people give away rights. Clarity is where you protect them. The third move may be the most important for staying safe. If the officer orders you out of the car, do not argue about getting out. Instead, separate compliance from consent. Here's exactly what you say. I will comply with lawful orders, but I do not consent to any searches. Memorize that one too. Listen closely because this is critical. A lot of drivers think stepping out of the car means the officer now gets to search everything. That is not true. Getting out and giving consent are not the same thing. In Pennsylvania versus Mims, the Supreme Court said an officer can order a driver out of a lawfully stopped car. In plain English, if the stop is legal, they can tell you to step out. Fighting that order on the roadside usually makes things worse fast, but stepping out does not mean you agreed to a search. That's why your words matter right there in that moment. Bad way. Most drivers say, okay, sure, what do you want me to open? Then they pop the trunk, open the glove box, and help build the case against themselves. Good way. Smart drivers say, I will comply with lawful orders, but I do not consent to any searches. Then they step out safely without helping the search. This is 100% legal. You can comply physically and refuse verbally at the same time. That is the sweet spot. Safe body language, strong words, no sudden moves, no sarcasm, no brave guy act, just calm control. If the officer says, open the trunk for me, you can ask one short question. Are you ordering me to do that, or are you asking for my consent? If they're asking, your answer is easy. I do not consent to any searches. If they're giving a lawful order, do not resist on the roadside, but make your refusal clear first. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings, and it matters more than people think. A roadside stop is not the place to win a legal argument. It is the place to avoid making your legal position worse. Your job is not to out-debate the officer. Your job is to avoid becoming the reason the search got easier. And there's something else. The moment you start opening compartments yourself, it can look like cooperation, not refusal. That hurts you later, so keep your hands visible. Move only when told. Say your line clearly, then let the officer make the next move without your help. 90% of drivers don't know what's coming next. If you're still here, you're already ahead of almost everybody on the road. Drop a comment saying I'm still here, because the next part ties the whole stop together. Now let's talk about the fourth mistake that quietly feeds searches: talking too much. This one shocks people because it feels harmless. The officer asks, where are you coming from? Why are you nervous? Whose bag is that? You ever been arrested? And drivers start explaining their whole life story. That is how a simple stop becomes reasonable suspicion, which is just a fancy way of saying the officer claims your answers sounded off. So here's your next line. I don't want to answer questions beyond what the law requires. If the stop turns more serious, you can say, I choose to remain silent. I want a lawyer if I'm being questioned. Those are simple, repeatable lines. Use them. Bad way. Most drivers say, I'm not nervous. I just had a little weed in here last week, but it's gone. Then the officer hears an opening and keeps digging. Good way. Smart drivers say, I don't want to answer questions beyond what the law requires. Then the officer gets fewer words to twist into suspicion. Let me show you exactly why this matters. Search cases are often built from tiny pieces. A shaky voice, a strange travel story, a joke about drugs, a sentence that sounds off, one bag that isn't yours, one old pipe you forgot about, one angry answer, one too friendly answer. All of that gets stacked together. Then later, the report says you seemed evasive, overly talkative, unusually nervous, or inconsistent. That report gets used to justify what happened next. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos, and over, the search starts long before the trunk opens. It starts with loose talk. It starts with the driver trying to explain too much. It starts with trying to sound innocent instead of staying controlled. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because silence gives the officer less to build on. You are still giving your license, registration, and insurance when required. You are still being civil. You are just not feeding the investigation for free. And remember this part. These lines do not block a lawful search if the officer already has a real legal reason, but they do stop you from creating that reason with your own mouth. That's huge. Now let's put the whole legal picture together in plain English. Schneckloth Bustamante means officers can use your consent even if they never told you that you could refuse. So your first protection is speaking your refusal clearly. Rodriguez Vs. United States means a traffic stop cannot be dragged out longer than needed just to poke around for other crimes, unless the officer has another real reason. So your second protection is asking, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Pennsylvania Ver. Mims means the officer can order you out of the car during a legal stop. So your third protection is not fighting that order while still saying, I do not consent to any searches. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection because it matches what the courts already said. Here's the reality. These cases do not give you a magic shield. They give you a roadmap. Refuse consent. Get clarity on whether the stop is over. Comply with lawful movement orders. Stop volunteering words that can be used against you. Now picture this real stop. You're driving home at night. Blue lights come on. The officer says you rolled through a stop sign. Your chest tightens. You hand over your documents. So far, normal. Then the officer starts smiling. You seem nervous? Where are you headed? Anything illegal in the car? Mind if I take a quick look? The wrong way goes like this. You laugh because you want to seem cool. You say, no problem, I've got nothing to hide. Then you keep talking. I'm just tired. My cousin borrowed the car. That bag and back isn't mine. I mean, it's mine, but not really. The officer hears the nerves, hears the messy story, and now the stop stretches. You step out. You open the trunk yourself. The officer finds something stupid and small, but now your whole night is gone. The right way is boring, and that's why it works. You give the required documents. You stay calm. When the officer asks to search, you say, Officer, I do not consent to any searches. If the officer keeps chatting after the ticket stuff is done, you ask, am I being detained or am I free to leave? If the officer tells you to get out, you do it safely and say, I will comply with lawful orders, but I do not consent to any searches. If the officer asks extra questions, you say, I don't want to answer questions beyond what the law requires. Watch what happens. The stop becomes cleaner. The officer may still do what they believe they can do, but you did not help them. You did not hand them consent. You did not fill the silence with risky talk. You did not confuse compliance with permission. That difference matters on the roadside, and it matters even more later. Next video, I'm revealing what to say when cops claim they smell weed. Subscribe right now because that one turns simple stops into arrests every single day, and you do not want to miss the exact words. So lock these in right now. First, never say yes to a search just because the question sounds casual. Second, ask if you are being detained or free to leave once the traffic business is done. Third, if you're ordered out, comply with the movement, but never consent to the search. Fourth, stop talking so much because your own words can become the reason the stop grows teeth. This is not about being disrespectful. It's about being prepared. When the moment comes, you will not rise to the occasion. You will fall to your training. So train these lines now. Hit subscribe so you catch that weed smell video next. Smash, like if this script just saved you from a future search, and drop a comment telling me which line you're going to memorize first. Stay safe out there.